we're constantly trying to prove. We're trying to prove that we can get the job done, that we know what we're doing. And what that leaves is this idea that we're seeking external validation. And that external validation is draining because we end up performing all the time.
Mm.
So the shift was to prove nothing, but not prove nothing in the sense that, oh, I don't have to do the job well. It's prove nothing in the sense that I don't need that external validation to prove my worth. And that was an unlock for many people.
They say it's lonely at the top. They're right. But you don't have to scale your company alone. Welcome to the Scaling CEO. I'm Glenn Gow, the CEO Success Coach. On this podcast, I sit down with top performing CEOs to uncover the hidden patterns and frameworks behind their success so you can avoid common pitfalls and accelerate your company's growth. Now, on to the show. My guest today is John Volturo. John is similar to me because he is a coach. We're different, however, in that John focuses on C-suite executives, whereas I focus exclusively on CEOs. John, I'm going to start over
Okay.
because I have a noisy thing happening in my office and I'm turning that over.
Okay.
So, start right over again. My guest today is John Volturo. John is similar to me because he's a coach. We're different, however, in that John focuses on C-suite executives, whereas I focus exclusively on CEOs. John's experience coaching C-suite executives includes CEOs as well, so he has a lot of insight on what it takes to scale a company from the CEO's perspective, which is what we're here to talk about today. As a former CMO and general manager, he's generated over $1.5 billion in revenue and helped scale companies from the ground up. He knows the pressure, the politics, and the pace of scaling a business firsthand. But what makes John different is his story. A brain tumor diagnosis forced him to redefine success, shifting his focus from a relentless need to prove his worth to a deep sense of self-trust. Today, he partners with C-suite executives, guiding them through both the strategic and inner work required to scale, to grow their companies, and to grow themselves without losing their way. John, it's great to have you on the Scaling CEO.
Thank you, Glenn. I'm really happy to be here.
You've written about your brain tumor journey, leading you from a mindset of proving to one of being and self-trust. Most CEOs I know are trapped in that prove it cycle.
Yep.
So for the leader who's listening right now, who's grinding it out, who's constantly performing, what is
Mhm.
that first step from proving rather to being actually look like in the middle of chaos?
Yeah, it's a good question. Most people I know, most executives I work with, whether they're, like you said, CEO, C-suite, and even people I talk to every day, feel like they're in a constant proving mode. And it's in part because we live in this culture that wants us to win. We live in a winning culture that's focused on that. So what that means for some people is that we're constantly trying to prove. We're trying to prove that we can get the job done, that we know what we're doing. And what that leaves is this idea that we're seeking external validation, and that external validation is draining because we end up performing all the time. So when
Mm.
I'm working with executives, what we talk about a lot is like, what is the shift that you really need to make in order to stop feeling like you're performative and you're actually trusting yourself so that you could do the work that you really need to do. And once we start that conversation, we learn about different ways that they can come home to themselves. But the thing that happens next is that people need to own their impact. So part of my prove nothing framework that you're talking about that was born out of my brain tumor was this idea that I spent my whole life in proving mode and it was exhausting. And when the brain tumor happened, when I woke up from that, I realized I could not live the life I was living before. I needed to live
Mm.
it in a different way. And when I started to develop this framework and start road testing it with people that I work with, it resonated so much. But it resonated because people were feeling like they're proving everything. So the shift was to prove nothing, but not prove nothing in the sense that, oh, I don't have to do the job well. It's prove nothing in the sense that I don't need that external validation to prove my worth. And that was an unlock for many people.
That's really a major shift. And what do you find might be the obstacle for most CEOs to make that shift?
I think for most CEOs, in particular, CEOs and people in the C-suite, it's a big shift to make because we are really rewarded in many ways by constantly proving that we could get things done and barreling through things versus just stepping back and thinking about what it is that we're really doing and aligning everything around us toward that end. So part of it is to realize that, hey, you can still be as successful, and I bet even more successful and more happy, feel a little bit more joy in your work if you thought about it through the lens of what if I trusted myself to get the job done versus constantly having to prove to the board member or to my consumers or to whoever relies on me on my team that I am the one who's capable of doing it. You're already sitting in that seat. We know you're
Right.
capable of doing it. Is
Right.
there a better way to do it is the big question.
That's right. I really like that. I use something a little bit different when I start working with CEOs, which is we sit down and we talk about what do you really want to accomplish in your life?
Mhm.
And that just that question is a shift for a lot of CEOs because their heads down. They have a board meeting coming up. They have a quarterly report they have to complete or a goal they have to achieve, and they're really, really focused on this thing that is performative, like you said. And if we open up that lens and say, what is it we want in life as a whole, then we can step back and look at a much bigger set of things that we can trust ourselves in and focus on. So we're different, but I really like what you're suggesting here. A next question for you. So you've scaled massive subscription based businesses
Mhm.
and run hyper growth.
Yes.
What is the one scaling insight that if you knew it back then, you would have saved yourself, you and your teams months of pain and struggle?
It's a good question, and I'm going to come back to this idea that I spent so much of my time in what I would call a swirl.
A
Constantly
swirl?
a swirl, just constantly worrying about everything I was doing. Was it the right decision? Am I aligning the team around the right things? And when I look back at that time, if I were to give myself advice to that younger John version of me during that period of time, I would literally say, trust yourself because you know what you're doing. And if I were trusting myself, what decisions would I be making that actually could help to create more innovation, create more progress? A lot of the time I spent doing things that were just trying to prove that I could be successful
Right.
in what I was doing and prove that I should belong in the job. That was wasted time. So I would go back and I would say to John, hey, ask yourself that question. Are you doing this for the external validation? Or are you doing this because it's the right thing to do and you feel it's the right thing to do and it will advance the organization, the company, and your team?
Right. Well, sometimes a CEO says, and they've said to me, Glenn, I don't even know what I don't know. And that's why
Mhm.
I'm here in a conversation with you. So, how do you handle that kind of situation? Because they can't trust themselves the way they'd like to because they don't know what's in front of them.
Yeah, and you know this better than anyone. When you're in the CEO role, you feel really isolated too sometimes. And
Right.
there's just so much that you're constantly, faced with that you're not necessarily able to share. And when I work with CEOs and C-suite people, part of what we do is work with their support network. Who is
Hmm.
their network to help them have those tough conversations and actually, shed light on some of the things they may not see. And most of the time, what I find is really successful for CEOs is to belong to something. And that thing is typically some sort of a group of like-minded people, whether it's a
Sure.
mastermind, whether it's another group where they can just really run things by others without the fear of judgment. So it has to be
Mhm.
something that feels removed from their daily world typically. And that's one of the things that I've seen work for folks. Now that's hard to do because we don't have time.
Right.
We often don't have time. So, what I work with executives is, and in my role as a coach, is to help them see other pathways too, that they actually can integrate into their lives in a more sustainable way. Sometimes, Glenn, it's listening to your podcast because it opens up their eyes and they start thinking about things in a different way. Sometimes it's, motivational books, business books. Really depends on the person. My coaching is pretty bespoke, so I work with them and their energy to figure out what works best for them.
Sure. Fantastic. So, how does you've touched on this a little bit, but I want to drill down a little bit more. How does a CEO practically build that muscle of self trust when every external signal is screaming for immediate results?
Yeah, it's a good question. Part of it is you know, thinking about the external validation as signals versus the weight of I'm good or bad if I succeed.
Mm,
Because one of the things we think about a lot when we get that external validation is I'm good, but it's also just a signal that that thing worked or that thing was rewarded. And
right,
how can you build on those strengths that you already have?
right.
And a lot of the work I do with all levels is really building on their strengths. So looking at it through that lens sometimes is helpful for folks.
That's fascinating. I have coached several CEOs who have a real concern about what the board is going to think. And I'm not going to say you ignore the board. That's not the case. In fact, the board ultimately decides whether or not you're going to stay in that role or not.
Yeah.
But but um, when it comes from a deep level of concern,
Mhm.
that's where they're lacking that self trust. And I help them not so much in the same way as you, but I help them build out a relationship with that individual or the people on the board, the individuals on the board. And I think that gets to the same place of building trust in themselves when they recognize they actually almost always know what the right thing is to do. And they shift in their relationship from being worried about what the board has to say and actually looking forward to what the board has to say.
I love that. I love that. And it reminds me of a tool that I actually use with the C-suite, which is a relationship health matrix. And we look at
I'm
all
sorry,
of the
say it again. I didn't hear you.
it's so I created something that I call a relationship health matrix.
Okay.
And it's a really powerful tool for folks because I don't think we do think about how much we need to invest in different relationships and how fluid it is. So for example, in the what you just talked about with the board, the board is the boss, right? So we need to understand what motivates them. We need to understand where our relationship is with them. We need to understand what works and what doesn't work, what they move toward, what these individual folks move toward and what they move away from. And part of this relationship health matrix that I work on with my clients helps them to understand where they are at a given time with a particular person. And we look at it with all of the stakeholders in their world. What I've discovered with a lot of folks that I work with is that they spend a disproportionate amount of time on relationships that are already good and that they understand
Ah,
versus relationships that can actually go from, a relatively good place to an even better place. And what you're talking about really resonates with me because relationships are all about understanding other people and having a connection. And when you have that connection, you also get a little bit of leeway. So the deeper your relationship, the deeper the connection, the deeper the well is for those external signals that might come back and say maybe, that wasn't so great for you to feel like that's not going to rock your world and ruin you because you know that this person also is working with you, not against you.
right. There's this concept of in the relationship world of either distance or frequency. And if you notice, oh, I spend a lot of time working with this executive on my team or with this board member, that's because you have the kind of relationship you're looking for. You've already achieved that. And so you spend more time there. But if there's a distance between you and another individual or less frequency, you want to ask yourself, what is causing that? Is it because I'm concerned that person can't perform if they're on my team and I don't know what to do about that? Or is it concern I'm going to get negative feedback from that particular board member and I'm worried about that? So
Mhm.
being aware of that distance and frequency you have with the people that are most important in your life, and we're just talking about the business life here for now, um, can help do exactly, I think, what you're talking about is to say, oh, I recognize I need to go build a relationship over here. I've been avoiding that.
That's right. That's right. That is, I think, the key to success for most executives is making sure they're nurturing those relationships and understanding where they are at any point in time. And not every relationship needs a lot of nurturing at all the time.
Right.
Sometimes you can pull back at sometimes. And that's okay because you have some sort of a deposit in the bank account, the proverbial bank account, so that if
Right.
there's a withdrawal, you still have a positive balance. So yeah, so what you're saying is something that's built into it. And I find, and I'm actually working with the president of a large media company here in Los Angeles right now, and we're doing this. We're going through this process. And through the process, we discovered that this my client is spending a disproportionate amount of time trying to please the CEO of the
Hmm.
company, when in reality, the energy that is being spent could be spent elsewhere on building the team because that's the team needs her at this point in time. And the CEO is okay. The CEO is the CEO.
Right.
So
Right.
sometimes you have to look at it through all these different lenses, different points in time, like what's important, what projects you're working on, what is the big goal or strategy that needs to get done.
That's great. So, shifting a little bit. So, you're a dad to twins, you're a
Yeah.
hiker, a cyclist, and you split your time between LA and Palm Springs. How has intentionally building a rich, full life outside of your work made you a better coach and leader? And how do you convince driven CEOs that things like quiet mornings by the pool aren't a distraction, but a strategic necessity for growth?
It's not always easy, as you know, but here's what I find when I work with people. The time that we have together becomes really generative. And what I mean by that is when I'm working with the CEO, suddenly these amazing insights occur. And they often occur because, hopefully I'm asking questions that open the aperture for people. When I'm waking up in the morning and I sit down in my backyard like I do every morning right here on the other side of this wall, and I have a cup of coffee and I'm looking out, I am my most creative. And when I'm my most creative, it fuels me. I'm problem solving. I'm thinking about things I don't normally think about. And it helps me to really prepare for the day. So those moments that you can find, whether it's with a coach, because a lot of the time we're the only opportunity people have to actually slow down and think,
That's right.
or whether it's just stealing 5 minutes for a cup of coffee.
That's great.
Some people do they could do it in their drive even, having listening to your podcast, doing whatever it is that activates them. But it's really important because otherwise we're not generating, we're just reacting.
So, funny story. Um, One of my CEOs during COVID was forced to work at home for a while.
Mhm.
And he would get up in the morning, get dressed, get in his car, and he would drive for 20 minutes, which was his normal commute, and then
Mhm.
arrive back home and
Ah,
then start his day
I love it.
because he needed that time.
Yeah,
That he had used that time historically in the car to do his planning, to do his thinking,
yeah.
and he just said, "Okay, here's another way I can do that. I'm just going to go in a circle and arrive at home." And and I agree with you wholeheartedly. And each person has their own way of finding time away from work that I think in the end adds to your ability to perform at work. All of my CEOs want to perform, whether it's for themselves personally, it's for the company. And we look at their balance in life. We look at do they have other things happening that are important in their life that they're giving time to, and counterintuitively spending more time with your family, spending more time taking care of yourself, spending more time doing something else outside of work that's important to you enables you to be a better performer at work.
Mhm. It really does. It really does. I'll just tell you a quick example. I walk one of my daughters to school every morning, and it brings me so much joy. And when I think about that word joy, I'm working with this 250 person team, um, very large team, 3 years of working with them, working with the leadership team, which is four core people and then 20 others. One of the things we constantly talk about is how do you build joy into your workday?
Mm,
How do you find those moments? We're on year 3. This is a government company that's asking for this. There's a desire, there's a need for it. So I steal some moments. I walk my kid to school every morning. We have fun conversations. We're walking the dog, and then I listen to music on the way back. And I feel ready for the day. I feel clear headed and excited to. Like this morning on my way back here, all I was looking forward to was meeting with you. So those moments, whatever they are, take them because they do exist.
they do. They do. I was lucky enough this morning. My wife and I got up early. We happen to live right next to a harbor.
Oh.
We went at 5:30 in the morning. We went stand-up paddleboarding
Ooh,
to a place where we could go swimming and watch the sunrise, and it was magical. It was the best possible way to start a day.
yeah, that's great. That's beautiful.
So last topic is artificial intelligence.
Mhm.
And I would love to hear your perspective on how you work with CEOs and recommend what they do in the arena of AI.
It's a good question. So I'll tell you my philosophy about AI, and it's born out of the experience that I've been having over the past, few years. So as soon as ChatGPT came out, I adopted it, I started using it, and, feel like it's helped me to be more of who I am. So I have a positive perception of its potential for people. In my work, one of the things I had to do was overcome that fear that it's going to replace coaches and look at it through a different lens. And the way I decided to look at it was that I'm a conductor of the relationship. So what that means is when I'm working with a client and they're entrusting me to help them to move to whatever level they want to go to next, one of the tools we could use is AI. And how do we use AI? So in some ways we use AI depending on the permissions I have from people to upload, external information that they're getting from people, 360s, feedback, whatever it is, and we craft plans together. That's one way that we use it. But it's used in a way that is to help generate future insights, to generate ways for them to actually do more, do it a little bit more efficiently. So when I'm working with executives, I think the number one thing they ask is, how do I still get the things that I need to get done and still have connections with people, but be more efficient in the way
Yeah,
I do things?
that's great. That- That's great. Um, my approach is I'm a super big fan of AI because I can see how it's changing things in a very positive way. And so I encourage CEOs to lean in even more than they are. And so we talk about what's happening operationally within their company. We talk about whether or not their employees are experimenting and
Mhm.
adopting AI in different areas. We talk about the failures and successes because we need to learn from those. And we also talk about if it's possible to incorporate that into product. And if so, how are we going about doing that? And so I encourage them to use it in a variety of areas because I see it every day from all my CEOs. They're giving me tips on how they're using it inside their companies. And while I don't share what that one company did, I do share the concept with all of
Mhm.
my CEOs so that they can get better faster. So it's fascinating to me to watch what's happening. So, John, that's all the time we have today. And it's been really wonderful talking to you. And I love your approach. How can people reach you?
Yeah. I would love to invite people to go to Volturo.com, Volturo.com, where you can connect with me right there. I have a contact button, or follow me on LinkedIn. Just search for John Volturo.
Fantastic, John. It's a pleasure.
Thank you, Glenn. Really enjoyed this.
That's a wrap for today's episode of The Scaling CEO. If you found this valuable, be sure to like, subscribe, and share with a fellow CEO who could benefit. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please give us a quick rating as it really helps more people find the show. I'm Glenn Gow, the CEO Success Coach. See you next time for more proven strategies to grow your business and leadership.